today. This is Nabila. Welcome, Nabila. So I really appreciate her topic. In fact, over the last year or so, I've read lots about stories related to her topic, and so it's really, I think, an urgent and relevant topic for today. So Nabila says, I would like to thank Mr. Wade for his guidance throughout this thesis process, Ms. Yossi for her support as my advisor, and my parents for their constant encouragement. Nabila's title is Save the Date for Graduation, Not a Wedding, Why Indonesian Parents Should End Child Marriage. Give me a second to set up the timer, and then I'll let you know when you can start. All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your wedding day. The joy, the laughter, the dreams of a future filled with love. Now, imagine yourself being 12 years old. Instead of playing with friends or worrying about school exams, you're being dressed in bridal wear. You don't really understand what's happening. You're scared, confused, and all the joy you imagined for that special day, it's gone. That wedding is no longer a celebration. It's a sentence. And in Indonesia, this isn't a rare nightmare, but a reality for far too many children. Their wedding day doesn't mark a new beginning, but a sudden end of their childhood. Marriage is forced upon them long before they even understand what love, commitment, or adulthood truly means. No choice, no voice, just expectations they never asked for. And with that, their dreams of education, of careers, of simply being a kid are all taken away just like that. Marriage is one of the oldest traditions in human history, going back over 4,350 years when people began to settle down and farming. It started in Mesopotamia around 2350 before Christ and eventually spread across cultures. But not all marriages have been positive. Child marriage is one harmful practice that still exists up until today. It goes way back to ancient Rome, where girls as young as 12 and boys as young as 14 were married for financial or social reasons. In the Middle Ages, child marriage is common due to the short life expectancies, and sadly, girls are often treated as property. Thankfully, things started to change in the 20th century with global efforts like the ICESER and CEDAW, and even with all the progress, child marriage remains to persist. Right now, around 650 million women and 150 million men were married before they turned 18. And in Indonesia, the numbers are especially concerning. The country ranks 8th in the world with over 1.2 million child marriages reported in 2018 and a 9.23% rate in 2023. While girls are the most affected, boys, those from rural poor areas, are not spared either. One of the biggest reasons is because of parents, many of whom are driven by poverty, tradition, social pressures, and conservative beliefs. Child marriage in Indonesia is more than just a problem. It's a crisis. And the worst part, many people still do not see it for what it is. This is not just a private family matter. It's a global issue and a national emergency. If we do not raise awareness, especially among parents, this will keep on happening. Indonesia has taken steps in fighting child marriage through global partnerships, education, legal reforms, and community efforts. The country also follows international agreement and has raised the legal marriage age for women from 16 to 19, equal to men. However, these changes have had limited impact in rural areas, where awareness remains low and the practice continues. For these legal and educational efforts to work, changes must start within the families, where cultural practices are deeply rooted. Parents play a crucial role in their children's lives. They are responsible to provide and protect for them. But in reality, many fall short of this responsibility by marrying off their children young and exposing them to a lifetime of hardship. Therefore, parents must put an end to child marriage practices for three main reasons. It endangers the health of the children, restricts personal growth and career opportunities, and undermines effective parenting and family stability. The first reason to end child marriage is that it puts children, especially girls, at serious health risk. In many cases, these girls are expected to get pregnant soon after getting married, even though their bodies are not ready. Experts actually recommend waiting until your late 20s or early 30s to have children for the best and healthiest outcomes. But with child marriage, these young women often face serious complications like anemia and preeclampsia. In countries like Indonesia, where there is a lot of pressure for girls to become mothers early, the risks are even higher. And it's not just the mothers who suffer. Babies born to these young mothers often face serious health problems. In fact, complications from pregnancy and childbirth are the second leading cause of death for girls aged 15 to 19 worldwide. The situation is even worse in rural areas where child marriage is more common and healthcare is harder to access. These young girls are then trapped in a cycle that puts both their lives and their children's lives in danger. Child marriage doesn't just harm physical health, but also mental health. Young brides and grooms are often unprepared for the emotional weight of marriage and parenthood, leading to stress, anxiety, and depression. The transition to adulthood is hard enough already, but adding marriage and kids on top of it makes things even worse. For girls, the pressure is even higher. They are often married to older men and is expected to take care of the household, husband, and kids, all while they are just teenagers. Many suffer in silence, struggling with emotional instability, and some even turn to self-harm or infanticide. On top of that, young brides are more likely to face intimate partner violence, which only adds to the mental and physical abuse. Sadly, in Indonesia, the stigma around mental health makes it even harder for them to seek the help they need. Without proper support, they are left to deal with everything on their own. Child marriage also increases the vulnerability to the spread of sexual and reproductive diseases. One big reason is the lack of sex education, especially in rural areas where talking about sexual health is still seen as taboo. Most young brides and grooms still don't understand how STDs spread, and that lack of knowledge leaves them vulnerable. Many parents believe that marriage will somehow protect their kids from this risk, but research shows the opposite. In fact, girls who marry before 20 are more likely to get infected. A Durex Indonesian report even revealed that 84% of teenage aged 12 to 17 have not received any sex education at all, which only makes things worse. The second reason Indonesian parents should end child marriage is because it restricts personal growth and career opportunities. One of the biggest setbacks is education, where a lot of children are forced to drop out of school once they enter married life. Lani Roselin from the Ministry Deputy of Child Growth and Development even confirmed that child marriage is one of the major causes of school dropouts. Once they get married, children are pressured to prioritize household responsibilities over their education, making it difficult for them to continue their studies. Research by Ius Titianian and Ajuk Sukmo found that most child marriage survivors quit school, with some dropping out because of discomfort or shame. Participants also thought that married people, especially those with children, could no longer enter school. When children are forced to drop out of school, their future career opportunities became significantly limited. It prevents them from gaining access to steady, well-paying jobs, as it lack the educational qualifications required for skilled occupations. In Indonesia, men are usually the primary breadwinners, while women are expected to stay at home. With fewer opportunities, these young women end up working in informal jobs or staying at home with no job security or no pay. Child marriage doesn't just take away their education, it takes away their chance to reach financial independence. Take Putri's story, for example. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, but at 14, her parents married her off. Her school books are replaced with chores, and her future was put on hold. Now, she watches her friends chasing their dreams while she is left behind. Her story proved that child marriage doesn't just steal childhood, but also potential. This situation is heartbreaking since it forces kids to give up their dreams way too soon. They cannot chase their ambitions anymore because they are thrown into a completely new life stage. Without education and career opportunities, child marriage locks them into a cycle of poverty. A research by Ius Titiani and Aju Sukmo found that 6 of 8 participants were still living with their parents or in-laws because their husbands did not earn enough to sustain the family. One participant, AM from Bekasi, mentioned that her parents still assist them by providing for their daily needs. Poverty is like a virus. Once it affects a generation, it spreads to the next unless education and opportunities cure it. And while child marriage isn't the only factor, it definitely it's a factor that keeps the cycle alive. Now, let's talk about the final reason. Child marriage should be stopped by Indonesian parents because it undermines effective parenting and family stability. Young parents often are not emotionally or mentally ready to raise kids, and that can really affect their children. Parenting takes more than just love. It requires patience, emotional maturity, and most importantly, education. Think of it like gardening. A child needs the right care, knowledge, and attention to grow properly. Without that, their development is stunted. Studies show that parents with limited education often struggle because they do not have the access to the right information about raising kids. And for young couples forced into marriage, their education is often cut short, leaving them unprepared to understand their child's needs. As a result, they may fall back on harsh or inconsistent parenting, which can lead to anxiety, depression, or behavioral issues for their kids. But the consequences of child marriage go beyond just poor parenting. They often strain the relationship between the couple itself. Child marriage often leads to more domestic conflict and many times divorce. Studies show that early marriage ends within 1 or 2 years, mainly due to emotional instability, financial stress, and inability to manage conflicts. Young couples, still emotionally developing, often struggle to communicate and solve problems. On top of that, there are usually an imbalance of power, with the younger wife having little to say, which can lead to frustration, resentment, or even domestic violence. This instability doesn't just affect the couple, it also impacts any children involved, increasing their risk of emotional and psychological struggles. Sadly, the damage doesn't end there. It can echo into the next generation. When parents lack knowledge and conflict leads to divorce, it creates an unstable family environment. Kids growing up in these situations often face financial struggles, limited education, and emotional stress, which can make the cycle of instability continue. They are more likely to experience the same challenges in their own relationships. Additionally, when kids see divorce as normal, it can lead to an even higher divorce rates in the next generation. Unless we make a change, the cycle of child marriage and family instability will continue, passing down financial, emotional, and mental challenges for years to come. Aside from the arguments that support the need for Indonesian parents to stop child marriage practices, many people also argued oppositely. Some people argue that child marriage is a long-standing tradition in places like Sumeneb, where it's deeply embedded in local culture. In fact, nearly 70% of people in Sumeneb Regency marry before 18, and in some areas, it's even as high as 80%. This tradition, which sometimes involves parents arranging marriage to settle debts, is seen as part of the local identity. In 2015, when there was an attempt to raise the legal marriage age from 16 to 18, the Constitutional Court denied it, showing just how difficult it is to challenge these long-held customs. But just because something's been a culture doesn't mean it should continue, especially when it harms people's rights and well-being. cultures evolve, and harmful practices have been abandoned as societies progress. Take foot binding in China or sati in India, for example. These practices were once accepted, but over time they were seen as harmful and eventually stopped. In the end, moving away from harmful traditions doesn't erase cultural identity, but strengthens it by aligning with human dignity and progress. Some people also may say that families in poverty see child marriage as a way to secure their child's future, especially in rural areas where opportunities are limited. While parents may genuinely want the best for their kids, child marriage often does more harm than good and doesn't provide the security they hope for. It takes away their basic rights like education, healthcare, and personal growth. Think of it like putting a bird in a cage. Parents might think that they are protecting their child, but they are also limiting their freedom and potential. Child marriage might seem like a way to protect, but it really just shuts down opportunities for a better future. Take Fatma's story in a small village in Indonesia. At 16, her parents arranged her marriage, thinking it would provide security. But Fatma saw it as an obstacle to her future, so she staged a hunger strike in protest. Her defiance changed her family's mind, and they eventually canceled the proposal. Fatma's bravery showed that girls deserve a voice in decisions that shapes their lives. Finally, some might say that child marriage helps prevent premarital sex and the shame that comes with it, especially in conservative beliefs where parents think it's a way to protect their kids' reputation. But today's society is changing, and women are focusing more on their education, careers, and personal goals. Using child marriage to control premarital sex ignores the importance of autonomy and informed decision making. While concerns about family honor might still exist, forcing young girls into marriage to preserve a reputation only harms them. Marriage should be about maturity and consent, not control. Rather than rushing into marriage, families should equip them with education and guidance to make informed, responsible choices while still respecting their dignity and aspirations. In summary, Indonesian parents should stop implementing child marriage as it endangers physical and mental health, restricts personal growth and career opportunities, and undermines effective parenting and family stability. Children forced into marriage face psychological discomfort, life-threatening pregnancies, and a lack of education or independence, which traps them in a cycle of poverty and oppression. These early marriages also impair the couple's ability to raise children effectively and provide secure households for future generations. There is a famous saying, "Children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future." Children are the foundation of a developing society when given the freedom to explore, learn, and grow. Child marriage deprives them from this opportunity, stealing their youth, dreams, and potential contributions to their communities. Instead of preparing for a career, they are burdened with adult responsibilities, further harming both the children and society. Now it is to act. Parents must recognize that protecting their children means rejecting child marriage and prioritizing their education and well-being. Societies need to push for a greater legal protections and question outdated traditions. Everyone, from legislators to regular residents, has to fight for genuine change and increase awareness. We have a choice. Do we let this destructive cycle go on, or do we act to guarantee that every Indonesian child has the right to a future free from harm and with health and empowerment? Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Nabila. Our panelists today are Miss Anita and Mr. Joel. Mr. Joel, you can go first.
Well, thank you, Nabila. That was a great presentation. I appreciate all that you have presented for us. I have a couple questions for you, starting with the one thing I'm curious about is you're recommending that you should be, like, women should be married around 20s and 30s, late 20s and early 30s, and that's the best time for childbearing to have children. And I would like to compare that or understand the biological factor of like when do young girls become women, or when do you hit puberty, at what age, and why is there such a gap between the age of puberty and then what you're recommending for your the ideal time for having children?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Joel. Can I clarify? Do you ask that when is the best age for marriage? Is that what you mean?
No, for childbearing.
For childbearing?
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I think the best age for childbearing, as I mentioned before, based on experts, is in your late 20s or early 30s. Because if not, you have higher chances to face complications like anemia and preeclampsia, which are often resulted because the body of the teenagers are not fully developed yet.
This is just a curious question of like, how old do you think Mother Mary was when she had baby Jesus? Sorry, I'm just.
Actually, I'm not really sure what age, but I think it's a pretty young age. I believe it's less than 20 years old.
Yeah, around 14, right? I'm just asking that because puberty traditionally was the age when girls are becoming ready to have children. They're now young women, and even in Indonesia, you celebrate your 17th birthday as like your debutante, your time, like you are ready. So would you disagree with the cultural tradition of the 17th birthday marking you as a woman ready for marriage?
I think 17 means that you're mature to be able to go to the society as a person, not mature enough biologically to be pregnant.
Okay. Also, one of your confirmatio says that early marriage, childhood marriage, would limit your opportunities. It limits other things. Wouldn't you argue that the opposite also, when you marry an older person, he has a stable financial background, he has networks that actually it could open up and expand networks. That's also the motivation for some parents to invite their children or to ask their children to get married because of financial opportunities. So wouldn't the opposite be true?
I do agree with some point that there will be younger girls who will be married to older men who is actually financially stable, and that will help her with that career. But I believe that when we talk about marriage is more than just one aspect. There are a lot of aspects that must be required in a marriage, like legal requirements, financial requirements, emotionally requirements. I think there is a lot of requirements, not only because of one motivation, but other requirements must be fulfilled in order to be considered a good marriage.
Okay. And wouldn't also, so you're agreeing kind of with that sentiment, that the opposite is also true. Wouldn't the opposite be true of the prevention of STDs, that some, or sexual transmitted diseases and risk of that? Some parents are afraid of that, and so they want their children, while they're both young and still virgins, still pure, and still all of the reasons that shouldn't they get married earlier to guarantee that there's not the spread of infectious diseases? Wouldn't the opposite also be true of that?
I think if it's for the opposite, these young girls and boys are not biological ready, and I think they're in a process of developing, and when they are married and they are to do this intimate procedures, I think it's gonna be bad for both the boys and the girl, because it's not preventing, but it harms more, because these young girls and boys are in a development process, and if marriage is seen as a solution, I don't think it's right. It's more to a harmful results.
Thank you. Another curious question that I have is it seems like you're approaching this issue from a more Western worldview. You use these words: marriage is about autonomy, consent, and maturity. And that seems to be from a Western, more liberal kind of worldview. Would you agree with that or not?
I do agree that marriage is about consent, maturity, and what you mentioned before. But I also believe in the biblical worldview of marriage, which is based on love, mutual consent, and a holy covenant before God.
I would also ask about there's kind of an assumption that if you you get married older, you're going to be more successful, more secure, more established. That's kind of an assumption that is underlying this paper. I would like to, in your research, did you come across the divorce rates or marital satisfaction rates of young couples, like both of them are young, getting married, and satisfaction there, or the divorce rates compared to people that are married in their 20s and 30s? To compare the two, I'm curious about that.
I do not have the specific data about the divorce rates between young couples and older couples, but based on research that I read, it is most likely to have higher divorce rates in young couples because they are not emotionally stable, they're not financially stable, and there's a lot of things that they haven't meet that makes the divorce rates higher.
Okay, let's move on to Anita. Miss Anita.
All right, Nabila. Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoy your presentation, and I'm glad that you talk about this since it's very concerning matter as well. Because early this year, like in I think around January, I read a news related to a very young couple, a 19 years old couple that have 3 years old child. And then, since they're very young, probably got married when they were like 15 or 16, and then they got to financial difficulties, and then they got into drugs, and then eventually killed their child. So I'm glad that you talk about this, and I really hope that young people outside the school can hear about this as well, since what you write about it's very, very good and eye-opening. On to my question. So I want to ask you for this first. In your thesis, you talk about there is rejection towards the change of the age, marriage age to 18 by the Indonesian Constitutional Court. But do you know what is legal reform number 16 in 2019? Do you know that law?
I'm not sure with that law, but I do know that based on the marriage law year 1974, it was 16 for girls, but there is an amendment in 2019 that raised the marriage age for women to 19.
Okay, good. So yes, that's correct. So the legal reform number 16 in 2019 is the change of the minimum marriage, which turned to 19 years old for male and female. Good. So I want to ask you, like, what are the measurable impact that these legal reforms had across urban and rural regions since it's already 19 for 6 years?
Thank you for the question. For these legal changes that has happened in Indonesia, especially in rural areas, it has been ineffective based on my research because, first of all, I think the government have to have less law enforcement in rural areas because in urban areas, we know that when we get married, there must be a marriage certifications or license. But in rural areas, because the government did not really focus and care much about marriage happening there, so there's a lot of marriages that is not registered or licensed. That's why a lot of people are able to marry young without the consent of the government.
Okay, good. So do you know how many percentage is child marriage currently now? Because, yeah, I'm gonna just ask you that first.
Based on my latest research in 2023 is a 9.23% rate. And I believe that the government also wants to set a target where they want to decrease the child marriage rates in 2030 with only around 6%.
Okay, good. So I don't really understand why you get the data first in 2018 from the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection, but after that you get the data for 2023 from Central Statistic Agency, because based on the press conference in 2024, May 2024, actually the rate for child marriage is going down. I will just read it for you. In 2021, it's 10.35. In 22, it's 8.06. And in 2003, it's not actually 9. It's actually 6.92. So since it's going down, how can it change your argument about parents should stop child marriage, since by the statistic, it's already going down?
Although the statistics shows that child marriages rates are going down, but in rural areas there is still a lot of child marriage that happen, and I believe that no matter the rates are how decreasing it is, I think it's really important, and we must share awareness to everyone in rural areas that the consequences of child marriages is harmful, so that the rates can decrease every year.
So you already agree that this statistic could also show that parents already kind of support to end the child marriage then?
Yes, I would agree to that.
All right. Okay, as we already know, the legal age of 19 is based on the government law, but we also know that religious courts also complicate this enforcement of the child marriage law. So how do you think it impacts the, child marriage? The religious court, or in Indonesia it's like kantor urusan agama.
I believe that the religious court is still very less focused and see these matters as less important. And I think it's something that the Indonesian government, and especially this religious party, should focus more on.
Okay. All right. So, do I have still time? Oh, okay. Oh, how long? 5 minutes? 1 minute? 2 minutes? Okay. One last question. So I'll give you a little bit insight on. There is a government social safety net, which is called in Indonesian it's called PKH, or Program Keluarga Harapan, or what is it in English, like Hope Family Program kind of thing. So it's like what government does is to transfer some money, like cash transfer, for kind of like unfortunate family that live in like poverty. So how this affect or fail to affect the economic rationale behind the child marriage?
I think if the program works effectively, it will automatically make the child marriages rate decrease, because by supporting economically, especially to families who are in poverty, their economic pressure will be lesser, and I think the option for child marriage will be lesser for them.
Okay, I hope that's true, since I think the kind of like the fact that happened, just a little bit insight for closure. What happened is young, not really young, yeah, but people tend to see child as assets. So when they have child, they expect the government could help them. So I hope you can like probably add more solutions to it in your thesis. I don't know whether there will be revision or not, but anyway, good job, Nabila. I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a few more questions. First of all, It seems to me that there's lots of different reasons for child marriage. One, it may be two teenagers think they love each other and get married, right? Another one may be the father wants their daughter to have a stable place, to a stable home, stable marriage while he's getting old and needs the money, so he sort of sells his daughter into marriage in the compound. And there's other, I've even heard of this horrible situation that happens not too far from here in West Java, where parents sell their 14-year-old daughters to foreigners, rich foreigners, just for a week or two, and then they get married with the idea that in 2 weeks they're going to get divorced, and that's part of the contract, right? Divorce is coming, and that's, to me, that's legalized prostitution. But there's lots of reasons, or some attempt at legalized prostitution. There's lots of reasons why this happened. Do you have any data that shows, or children who get married, is it usually forced to get married, or is it voluntary? And do you have data about what's the most common?
Thank you, Mr. Wade, for the question. Unfortunately, I don't have the data for it, but I do believe that child marriages comes from several factors. It may comes from the parents who force their kids through arranged marriage, but it can also comes from the children itself. Maybe they think it's a way to help their families, or a way to save their future, or a way that is based on love. So I think there are several factors.
Okay, I have a few questions from your peers. One is, the Bible says obey your parents. What if your parents tell you've got to get married, you're 14 years old or 15? What's the right response?
I do agree that the Bible told us children to obey the parents, but at the same time, the Bible also told us that marriage should be based on love, mutual consent, and, as I said before, a holy covenant before God. And by we obeying parents, God see the process in everything. So sometimes it's okay. I believe that it's okay not to obey our parents when the circumstances force us not to, because I believe God sees every process in every decision we make.
Okay. Also, there's a, sort of at the base of all of this, or at least at some percentage of it, going back to what I said, that there's different reasons, but there is some foundation where the problem is really just that women are treated like property. Don't you think so? Is that a foundational piece of this argument? Is that women shouldn't be treated like property?
Yes, I agree that women should not be treated as property. As we know, this concept of women being treated as a property has go back way to the historical context of Indonesia, where in the colonial era, most girls are often be seen as as a trade or a way to give something back in advantage. And I feel like through this thesis, it's a way to fight for women's rights.
Okay, that's good. And so talking about that to this group of people is one thing. How do we reach those in the rural kampungs who are more involved in this kind of child marriage? I think it's probably higher in the kampung, yeah? How do we reach them?
I do believe that the government already tried efforts to reach out to these rural areas through programs. And one way, I think, is to strengthen the law enforcement by doing regular checks whether these marriages have license or registrations, and probably be more stricter by giving punishments to those who illegally married their child underage.
Yeah, that's good. That was going to be my next question, but time is up. You have succeeded. Thank you, Nabila. For now, Nabila, friends and family, will meet over here for photos and panelists. And then tomorrow we'll start again at 9 o'clock for Tuesday's presentations. Thank you, guys.